All right, Monday night, Krug Show podcast, back with you on YouTube. Hope everybody's having a phenomenal day. As you can tell by looking at my face, I sat out in the sun today wearing sunglasses. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So I got the raccoon look watching JV baseball here in the East Bay, but hope everybody's having a phenomenal day. Joining us tonight on the Krug Show podcast itself on YouTube is our good friend Brian Peacock, and he's with us to do a little 49er mock draft, weeks away now from the NFL draft. Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Larry. It's great talking to you again. I remember last year, right about this time, we did a mock draft together, doing a podcast. And if I'm not mistaken, about round 6, we drafted a running back out of Louisiana, a Ragin' Cajun, Elijah Mitchell, to the 49ers in that mock draft, and it came true. And what a rookie season he had. So let's see if we can muster some of that magic again in this mock draft.
Wow, that was actually a good call. Was that your call? Because that couldn't have been my call.
I'm going to give the credit to you on that one. I think because I know you. I know you're a big Ragin' Cajun guy, so I think
that's right. I did interview Elijah Mitchell on draft day, and he was having a big party with his family, and he was very, very confident in himself. And man, the 49ers found something there, because I think what happened was he ran for the scouts, and I think he ran 140 time, and I believe the Niners scout doubled back in, came back to Louisiana, worked him out again, and the Niners had a 4.33 time on Mitchell. It's kind of interesting now in hindsight, looking back at it in retrospect, because I wouldn't say, Brian, I don't know how you feel about it, I didn't feel like Mitchell really played to the 4.33 speed this year, but that's beside the point. The more important stat on him was that he never fumbled at Louisiana on all the carries he had there. He never fumbled the football, and he didn't fumble this year for the Niners. And I think he was one of only a couple backs all year in the league to have as many carries as he did and to not cough it up. So overall, I think Niner fans have to be thrilled with Elijah Mitchell.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And he does have a pretty good top speed, but he doesn't have that 4.3 gear that you might expect for someone, that blazes a time like that. I do think he might have bulked back up again, because I think he lost weight for workouts pre-draft, and I don't think that was necessarily his playing weight. So maybe that's why. And it's probably a good thing if he carries a little bit more weight, because he's got plenty of speed. He can still make some big runs, but we're not talking, Raheem Mostert, Matt Breida type top end speed for Elijah Mitchell. But really, really good player, just gets downhill, decisive, gets that, that one cut downhill, and that's why he played over the 3rd round pick last year.
All right, so here's the plan for tonight. We're going to talk a little draft, then I'm going to show you the mock draft that I just did. Kind of go through it a little bit, get your thoughts on it, maybe read some of the comments in the chat. A lot of draft fans this time of year, a lot of questions. People want to ask about this guy or that guy, and feel free, if you want to chat us up, throw your questions and comments, and we'll get to them as we see fit here. But first, and then we'll do a mock draft with your selections, and then we'll kind of compare a little bit and go back and forth and talk a little 49er football. Before we get to my mock draft, what did you make of the 49ers draft class a year ago? It started with Trey Lance, and yet if you look in hindsight, Mitchell was a phenomenal pick in the 6th round. Look how much he played. But for the most part, the 49er draft choices, outside of a couple, really didn't see the field that much, really didn't make that much of an impact. So what was your thoughts on John Lynch's draft class from a year ago?
It's such an odd class, because the 49ers continue to find those 5th, 6th round picks. And so, keep collecting those picks, because man, they've been gold for the 49ers. They've been pretty hit and miss in the earlier rounds. And it was the same story last year. But when you look overall at what their draft haul was and what they spent to go up to number 3. So we're talking, 3 1st round picks, a couple of, 3 3rd round picks, when you count their draft picks that they actually took last year, and the 2nd round pick. And for all of that, they didn't get much of a return. Ambry Thomas, of their first 3 rounds, made the biggest impact on the team, and he didn't play well until the very, very end of the season. And they even went and signed another cornerback to start over him this year. So it's a class that's going to take a while to pay off for what they paid to get all of those players. But really, it all boils down to how good that class is how good Trey Lance is. And I saw some good signs from Trey Lance, and we'll see what he looks like. And whenever the Jimmy G thing, whatever, I don't know what's going to go on with that, but however that
Right,
shakes
we'll get
out,
to that too.
I really think it's got to be Trey Lance's time now, and you got to get him some reps because it's the one thing he's missing in his young football career. He just needs to play. So the more he can play, the more reps he gets, the better. And it's all about making sure that he is as good of a pro as he can be. But they found some nice late round players, and we'll see what happens with Aaron Banks maybe getting in there and starting this year, and who knows what Trey Sermon's career is going to look like at running back. But, even if he's a solid backup, if you got your starter in the 6th and your backup in the 3rd instead of vice versa, I guess it's still okay as long as you found a starter there in the 6th round. So it's an interesting class, and it's going to take a while, I think, to find out what the true value of that draft class was.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you about Banks because we didn't see him. We didn't see him at all. But Jalen Moore looked good to me in the preseason. Trey Sermon in the Seattle game, I thought really started to find his flow, and yet, for whatever reason, didn't see the field really after that, hardly at all, if at all, that I can think of. So, I like Sermon. I like Jalen Moore. I don't know about Aaron Banks. There's a lot of unknowns still from last year's class. With that as the backdrop, though, let's get right into it, and we won't waste any more time. This is the mock draft that I just concluded just minutes ago, and tell me what you think. I've got it up there on the board. So I got to the pick 61, and I'm staring right at Kenneth Walker III, the Wake Forest transfer who had a bust-out year at Michigan State this year. And I realized they've got Mitchell, they've got Sermon, they re-signed Jeff Wilson, they got pretty good depth of backfield. But I'm just looking at that going, I'm not passing on the bet on what I think is the best back in the draft, especially when the outside zone is the whole offense is predicated on having a back to get to the edge. And Kenneth Walker III is a great football player. I think he's a Pro Bowl running back, and at 61, I'll gladly snap him up right there. Give me your thoughts on starting the mock with Kenneth Walker III.
I mean, I wouldn't fight you if you said Kenneth Walker was the best pure running back in this class. Breece Hall might have something to say about that. But if you take the third down value away, because, and it's hard with college running backs because they don't throw the ball to college backs in a lot of schemes nearly enough. And some guys are actually pretty darn good at it, and they're athletes, and they've got hand-eye coordination, and they turn out to be decent pass catchers in the NFL. And so we'll see what that's like for Kenneth Walker. But I mean, he's dynamic. He's got everything you're looking for in a two-down back at least, and I think he's probably got a lot more in there. So, Kenneth Walker plus Kyle Shanahan is just a 1,200-yard back all day long. So it's hard to say that, except for positional value, that would be a bad selection. So I think that would be a home run pick. But you've already got your cheap starting running back in place, and so I would just. The only thing I would say about that I don't like about it is just the position of running back, and it's not the player of Kenneth Walker. But I would hope to wait on running back and maybe just add another day 3 guy in there. But I felt the same last year, and they went in the 3rd round and drafted a running back. And I know they value running backs highly, and a level of attrition at running backs too. So draft a running back every year. I'd probably rather do it on day 3 than, in the 2nd round or the 1st round in most years. But Kenneth Walker with Kyle Shanahan would be a star.
Yeah. To me, I mean, you can go best player available or you can go position of need. And to me, it's like when if you do go best player available, then maybe the next pick, you're going back to the position of need. Or if you start with position of need, you get to that 2nd pick at 93, then maybe you go best player available there. I think at times in a draft, if you're going to have success, you got to go with the best player available. And if you're going to have a football team that wins games, you also have to address need. And need is something that, has to be a priority somewhere in the pecking order. I went need for the next couple picks, and I went with Sam Williams with the 93rd pick overall. I love me some Sam Williams. If you watch Ole Miss, this guy came flying off the edge. He turned the Egg Bowl into his personal playground and just absolutely dominated Mississippi State in that game. Sam Williams, forgettable name, not a forgettable game. This guy's a crazy athlete. I don't think he's going to be on the board at 93, but in this mock draft he is, and I'm grabbing him right there and filling that edge rush position opposite Bosa. What do you think of Williams? What do you think of where in the whole lineage of needs do you have edge rusher?
I think the 49ers have done a good job, like you said, of putting themselves in a position to draft best player available, because you look at Aaron Banks, I don't know what he's going to be at left guard, but if you look at their roster, they have 5 players that you could say, okay, they're going to plug in 5 starters here. And you look at their defensive line, if they dress 10, they need to split camp with 10 defensive linemen. They've got 5 ends and 5 tackles. A lot of them are on 1-year deals, but you can say, okay, well, you don't have to force this need, but you shouldn't be shy about bringing talent in there on either side of the line. And that's the way I feel about edge. And it's too important of a position not to address. And if you can get a young player that's under contract for a little while, and I've said that they've needed a Robin to Nick Bosa's Batman, a young player there. A ton of guys coming back on 1-year deals. I think they can get some production with Chris Kucerik with a lot of those guys. But if the right edge player is there, I don't think the 49ers should hesitate. And Sam Williams, on the field has just a ridiculous amount of athleticism. He runs running backs and quarterbacks down on the perimeter like nobody's business. It's pretty crazy to see a guy that big. And he weighed in at the you thought he'd be like, oh, is he going to be one of those 6'3", 235-pound edge rushers? He's just 260 pounds. I mean, this guy can flat out fly. He's not as interested in stopping the run, I think, which is why he would be available still in this range. There's some off-field stuff for him as well. So I don't know, what that's going to look like for some teams' draft boards, if they're even going to take him off their draft boards. But I think there's a chance that he falls further than what his talent would dictate, in a deep edge class, and he can absolutely just run people down. It's pretty impressive what kind of athlete he is.
So at 93, I'm going Sam Williams. I'm going need again at 105. And I'm going with Nick Cross, a safety from Maryland, who ran in the 4.3s. And I kind of think that Jimmy Ward's future is at no longer at free safety, that he can play free safety, but they don't, he could also play strong safety. I think Jimmy Ward is their best free safety and their best strong safety. In this case, I'm moving him to strong safety, and I'm starting Nick Cross as a rookie from Maryland at free safety. I just love what Cross can do. The instincts, the speed. He can close a ton of space. The Niners love to play the cover 3. In that cover 3, the free safety has to be a guy who can cover a ton of space and has great instincts. And I think Cross is that guy. Another guy that I think he's going to go in the 60s and the 70s in that range at the end of round 2, top of round 3. But in this draft, he's there at 105, and I'm taking him. Give me your thought.
Yeah, and I think safety is a position where you can press your luck a little bit, because it's not a position there's such a lot of good safeties in the league right now, and it's not a high value position for a lot of teams. So maybe you can let that safety slide to you late 3rd round, whether it's 93 or 105, even though the 49ers could absolutely add a starter there. And I'm with you on the Jimmy Ward thing, not even so much as just moving him purely to strong safety, but just the fact that they like to interchange their safeties so much now. And if you're going to draft a day 2 safety, he better be able to do both. And I think Nick Cross can. And I think it's huge value for him at 105 because he's got size. He can play as strong safety. He's got speed. He's got range to play in the deep middle, which is where I'm worried about if they plan on plugging Hufanga in as the full-time strong safety. I saw him a few too many times, even last year, interchanging. We saw Tart do that so well because Tart, even though he's a big guy, was so athletic. And when they bring Jimmy Ward down and play him in the slot, and then they have the strong safety, rotate out and play center field, I don't know if that's where you want to have Hufanga all that often. So looking for range, looking for a safety that can do a little bit of everything. And to be honest with you, another carbon copy of Jimmy Ward wouldn't be a bad thing, because then you'd have both safeties that can interchange. They can both drop down on the slot. They can both play, in the box, and they can both play deep middle of the field. So in that regard, I think Nick Cross is a bigger version, of that same type of a player. So I love that.
The other thing about safety and about defensive backs is that you got to scout them. You can't just show up at the combine and say, oh, I'm going to find the fast guy. Tarvarius Moore is faster than all these guys, but he doesn't have the instincts. He really doesn't have the instincts to play, safety. He's more of like a jumbo corner. So you got to not just find a guy who can run fast. You have to find a guy with functional speed, and that you see that speed translate to the field, and he's closing down those spaces. All right, at 134, I went wide receiver. The 49ers, I don't know how you feel about this, Brian, but I think the 49ers need a receiver in this draft, but they don't need just any receiver. They need a very specific receiver. They need a burner. They need the kind of guy who has the kind of speed that makes defensive coordinators stay up at night. They need that guy who's going to stretch the field and open things up for Ayuk and Debo and Kittle and Jennings and everything underneath. And they need somebody who's going to run the coverage off, who's really, really electric. And I watched this kid from SMU. Now, they got a receiver there named Reggie Roberson, I believe, at SMU, and he was supposed to be the guy this year. But man, Danny Gray is just electric, explosive. And I don't know if he's going to help you as a return guy, but this guy is just such a vertical threat that I went with him at 134. And to me, he is the perfect complement to the other weapons the 49ers have.
He's a Shanahan guy too, because he's got that speed and that after the catch ability. And Shanahan loves him some run after the catch. I've kind of felt like the 49ers need to do a better job of building their wide receiver group as, like a basketball team. I really like that theory of, you need your point guard, you need your two guard, but you need some bigger, you need some wing guys, you need some size as well. And I think they've got, if George Kittle is your center, they've got the power forward in Juwan Jennings, right? And so, and you've got your point guard and your two guard. So I'm looking at somebody that could maybe stretch the field a little bit more on the outside, and not so much worry about that Shanahan prototype of the guy that's over the middle and run after the catch, even though they could utilize that as well. But I think speed is very crucial no matter who they bring in. If it's a little guy, if it's a slot guy, if it's an outside the numbers guy, because their quarterback now can get the ball down the field, and I want to outscore some people. So I have no problem with the 49ers drafting a wide receiver early. And if they do, I hope they target some speed, because it would really unleash an extra level of the 49ers offense, make defenses cover more blades of grass than they've had to in Kyle Shanahan's offense with Jimmy G.
All right, before we get to the chat and then your thing, let's make sure we throw our sponsor in here. Dan Coach Emilio is our sponsor, and he is our premier sponsor, Dan Coach Emilio. And he can't help keep your money secure, or he definitely can help you keep your money secure in uncertain times with all that is going on in the world. You want to put your money where it is safe in your retirement and for your retirement. With 25 years of experience and born and bred in the Bay Area, he's a Bay Area native. Dan can help you in a lot of ways. He can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. Give him a call today for an appointment today, and make sure you are putting your money where it is secure, where it is absolutely secure. Once again, Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist at Secure Money, 925-628-9966. Your fellow Bay Area sports fan and retirement planning specialist. Give Dan a call today. Once again, 925-628-9966. Check him out online at securemoney.com. Also, one of our brand new sponsors, and we'll tell you more about this sponsor in the future, but Telemetrics. Check them out on the web, telemetrics.co, not com, telemetrics.co, and we'll tell you more about Telemetrics as we continue on. They are our brand new sponsor, and we're really happy to have them in the house. All right, just wrapping up my day 3 picks before we get to the chat line, and then of course Brian's picks. We'll do a little mock draft here with Brian and get his thoughts on who he likes. This is what I'm going day 3, and the reason I feel so good about this mock draft is I got 5 picks in day 3 that are all home runs in my opinion. Wanye Thomas is a safety from Georgia Tech. He's a box safety, but man, he will hit you. He hits like a linebacker. He moves a little bit better than his 40 time indicates, and he'll be there on day 3. Jeffrey Gunter, a buddy of mine, is the recruiting coordinator for Coastal Carolina. And he told me, man, check out Gunter. Gunter comes flying off the edge. He's an edge rusher. Goes about 270, really flies. One of my biggest sleeper picks is the next pick at 220, Tanner Connor, who played at Idaho State, runs in the 4.3s at 235 pounds. Big receiver, almost like a tight end, but with big-time speed. And I think he's a guy who's going to come flying off the board. Andrew Ogletree, a tight end from Youngstown State in Ohio, 6'7" tight end with athletic ability and good hands. And then Matt Areza, the punter from San Diego State, with the final pick in the draft. I don't think Areza will be there because he's the best punter. He also can place kick, but those guys fill needs. Tight end, a receiving tight end, another big talented receiver, an edge rusher, a strong safety, and a punter to replace Mitch Wishnowsky. Give me your thoughts on my day 3 picks.
Well, I will say right away, I love the theme of drafting speed and adding speed to the 49ers roster. Not only multiple 4-3 guys, but you got a 260 pounder who runs 4.4s in Sam Williams as well. And yeah, Matt Araiza, if Mitch Wishnowski's worth a 4th-round pick, then Araiza's probably going to go in that same range or maybe even higher. I don't know how high is too high for a punter. But yeah, I would not be upset at all if the 49ers drafted a punter very late, and if Araiza's still there, reset the clock on a rookie contract for a punter rather than going into the Mitch Wishnowski's. He's been a fine punter, but he was an old prospect. He's gonna be 30 years old before his rookie contract's over, and you're gonna re-up him, or so I wouldn't hate a late round pick on Matt Araiza. But yeah, I don't. Can you help me out with this one, Larry? Because is this the most 4-3 guys ever in a draft class? They're just all over the place, everywhere. And this guy Connor comes out of nowhere, and I guess he's a former track guy too. But there's these track guys that actually can play football, because it used to be that you could tell the track guys because they didn't like getting hit and they like to stay clean. But I feel like there's a lot more track guys that are playing football in the offseason, or just football players running track in the offseason.
Well, and look at the 40 times at Indy. I mean, how many sub 4.3s did we see? Now, they were unofficial, and by the time they became official, those sub 4.3s, a lot of them were high, or, low 4.3s. But still, I mean, 4.3 speed used to be something that Deion Sanders had, but nobody else. Now it's like, hey, there's 4.3 guys everywhere you look. I mean, and then you'll see big guys, defensive ends. I mean, Boye Mafe, I think, ran 4.5. He's like 260 pounds. And, it was like low 4.5s.
A record number of offensive linemen breaking 5.0, breaking 4.9.
Exactly.
Which used to be a very short list of guys just historically that had broken 4.9. There's only about 15 or 20 of them. And I think there was half a dozen this year.
Let's hit the chat and see what people have to say. And then we'll get into a lot of people so far in the chat room. So somebody's saying, what round? Let's go. Here we go. 49er Gang 916. What round is the running back Strong out of South Dakota projected to go? Pierre Strong is who you're referring to, and he might be the fastest running back in this draft. But another guy, I've seen anywhere from the 6th round to the 3rd round. My guess would be like late 4th, early 5th. That would be my guess.
Yeah, 4th or 5th round, I think, is the right spot for him. He's definitely someone I would be targeting on day 3 for the 49ers. He's got that Matt Breida type top speed, and his speed is not track speed, it's play speed. I think he had the most 50-plus yard runs with 10 in NCAA football last year. That guy can flat out fly and would be a nice fit behind what the 49ers have at running back.
GTC Reels, Raccoon Eyes. Yes, I know. JV Baseball, East Bay. It was rough. It was a rough day. My wife asked me 4 different times, have you put lotion on? No, I don't need it. I'm good. I feel good. So much for that. I've got the.
You didn't have your wife like powder your face or get your producer involved there with some makeup before you went live?
Yeah, exactly. We got this one. Look at this. Spy Nick Danger. Go, Brian.
Let's go.
Look at that. You got fans in the house.
By the way, I got to say, Krug, just welcome to YouTube. Welcome to the game. I love seeing you doing this. And I was excited when I saw that you were when you were starting up your own channel. So I'm glad I had a chance to jump on here with you.
Oh, dude, I am fired up. I mean, there's something really cool about, talking directly to the audience, doing these chats, booking who you want, talking really exclusively about what you want. I mean, anybody who knows me knows I want to talk about very few topics. I want to talk about the Niners. I want to talk about the draft. I want to talk about the Giants. I want to talk about the Warriors. I want to talk sports. I don't, for the most part, I don't need a lot of the other stuff. I mean, I don't mind talking about other things, but for the most part, I just, to me, what I like talking about, I like talking about.
And they were forcing you to talk to guys like Steve Young all the time. You really want to talk to the Peacock.
Exactly. So Steve's going to be on here. Steve sent me a really nice note. Steve's going to come on. Steve's coming on. Steve, if you're out there, fist in the air, buddy. Love Steve Young, and I really enjoyed talking to him. Kelch Chronicle says, I feel like Sermon and Mitchell are going to be a nice 1-2 punch. I don't know where you are on Sermon. I like Sermon. And it's funny, when I had John Lynch on late in the year, I asked him, I said, hey, John, I liked what I saw from Sermon in the Seattle game. And he's like, I did too. And we never saw him again. I mean, it's
I
like,
drafted him for a reason. Kyle doesn't like him, so let's.
I mean,
Hey,
do you
Kyle
think
Shanahan's tough on rookies. I think that's a big part of all of it,
is
and
it
that
Kyle or is it Bobby Turner?
maybe Bobby Turner, but we know Kyle Shanahan's pretty demanding. We've seen the Ayuk doghouse now. We saw Sermon get into that mold. I don't know if it's about practice habits. I don't know if it's about hitting the hole harder, because I do know that it was pretty clear that that even coming out of the draft, that Elijah Mitchell hits the hole harder than
Yeah.
Trey Sermon. And it's hard for young running backs, I think, to hit that first hole and hit it quick, because they can out athlete people their whole lives. And if you're going to, Oklahoma and Ohio State, that means you're a superstar prospect and you're outrunning everybody your entire life. And so there's a tendency to want to do that. And you've even seen it with guys like Saquon Barkley in the league, where it's like, man, you got to hit that hole when it's there, because it closes quickly. And guess what? These defensive linemen can run 4.4s now too.
Yeah. No dancing at the line of scrimmage. Hit the hole. I mean, Frank Gore's going to Canton. What can you learn from Frank Gore? He hit the hole. I mean, absolutely full speed. Hell of this, hell of that. A&M edge rusher Michael Clemens with the 93rd pick. You know what? I'm a Michael Clemens nut, and he's way better than the 93rd pick in this draft. But there has been some off-field issues that have to be cleared up, and I think that's why he may be there at 93. But I'm a huge Michael Clemens fan. Itchy 95 says Cross would be great. Thank you. Okay, this is kind of an interesting one. Mark says, Larry, why are you so confident in our current O-line as to not draft anybody? It's not that I'm that confident in the O-line. It's just they drafted Aaron Banks and they drafted Jalen Moore. And how young of a room do you want? I mean, those guys essentially, guys, I mean, if you really think about it, Banks and Moore will be the equivalent this year of rookies. They have not played a down for the most part in the regular season. Banks was only active, I believe, 2 games all year. Moore played the entire preseason at left tackle, and then he was supposed to share reps with Tom Compton, and that quickly evaporated. And suddenly it was Compton's job, and Moore wasn't seeing the field at all. So I don't know how young I want to get on the offensive line. I would almost rather go, find a veteran. I mean, what do you really need on the offensive line? You've got your left tackle. I think I think at this point you have to assume Mike McGlinchey is your right tackle. So then you got Jalen Moore, who I think can play right tackle. So those are your 3 tackles right there. Brunskill's kind of a jack of all trades. They have him at right guard. Max, your starting center if he's back, and it sounds like he is going to be back. Left guard, Banks maybe slides in. If you said, what do you really need? You might need a guard who's ready to play, and there's a couple guards in this draft I like. I didn't get one in this particular mock draft, but I'd almost rather see them go and find a veteran who's ready to play NFL football right now, guaranteed, as opposed to another guy with skills, another guy with, long arms, another guy with, measurables, but no experience and maybe no guarantee they're ready to go. I don't know how many offensive linemen you can have in a room who can't play right now. So I don't know. How do you view the O-line? A lot of people, we had John Chapman on the other day. We did a mock draft. John went O-line twice early. I just don't see it as, not that you can win with any O-line, but I think there's guys out there, veterans that you could pick up. I'm a big fan of Will Hernandez. He's still out there in the free agent market. He's a big-bodied guard. I just don't know that their need is as severe at offensive line as it looks when you factor in Banks and Moore and the return of McGlinchey. How do you see the Niner O-line as far as in the pecking order of needs?
It's hard to know because we saw so little, like you said, of Banks. What did he look like in practice? I never liked the Banks pick. I thought he was overdrafted just based on his talent, and I thought he wasn't necessarily a great scheme fit either. I mean, he would fall over trying to get to the second level. He was a wall-off sort of a blocker, and I think maybe that's why. And they've even talked about how they wanted him to lose some weight, and so maybe he shows up a little bit quicker, a little bit lighter in camp this year. But on the other side of it, I liked what I saw from Jalen Moore. He had a little bit better movement skills, and so he's got some tackle guard versatility. And the other problem for drafting a guard only player like Aaron Banks, if he wasn't ready to start, you can't really suit him up as one of your 7 because you need your backup lineman to be able to play center or tackle, and he can't really do that. So maybe there's more there, but we just weren't able to see him because he didn't have the versatility to be a backup last year, and now we'll see him in the starting lineup. I'm not sure, but if I'm looking in the draft, I want versatility there, and I'm looking at Alex Mack, and I don't know if there's a guarantee that Alex Mack is going to be back. John Lynch we just recorded a podcast earlier about John Lynch's comments are pretty much identical to what he was saying about Joe Staley 2 years ago when he retired. And so he just got married. We'll find out where Alex Mack's head is, but I would say looking ahead to the future at center and someone who has some guard versatility to compete there as a rookie, that's probably where I would try to attack. And I think there's some value there on day 2 for that type of a player.
What do you think of McKivitz maybe sliding in there?
Yeah, and that's where I agree with you. The 49ers have a lot of those guys. You've got McKivitz, you've got Jalen Moore, you've got School. If anything,
forgot about School. Justin School's there too.
School's coming back from injury from last year, so you've got bodies. If you're worried about the position, go find a starter. JC Tretter's out there. I think Billy Turner he was cut by the Packers. I think he finally signed somewhere, but that would have been somebody, who could play some tackle. But, McGlinchey had a pretty nasty injury too. Is he for sure going to return from that? A lot of people don't come back from a torn quad like he had. So there are some questions, but if you're going to draft a player, he better be versatile and either have tackle guard versatility or center guard versatility, in my opinion.
Itchy 95 says Danny Gray is fire. There you go. All right. Fire. My kid just told me fire's good, Dad.
Fire's good for the most part.
Damn, I'm getting heckled by We Suck. I can see Krueger got some vitamin D today. Thank you. Yes, and you can see I did wear my sunglasses. Sacktown Izzy with this little nugget, liking the Tanner Connor pick. Once again, more fire there. Celts Chronicle says, man, I love hitters. Are hard-hitting safeties overrated nowadays in this don't hit too hard NFL? That's a great point. You think of some of the great safeties that have played for the Niners, Ronnie Lott, Jeff Fuller and others, Chet Brooks, recent vintage, Dante Whitner, Deshaun Goldson, guys who, the woo hit, right? The hit shit, everybody goes, woo! Guys who separate receivers from the football. There's no question, it's Brian, that it's the safety position has evolved through the years. Chuck Cecil's need not apply anymore. It's now you better be Merton Hanks, right? You better be able to cover. You almost have to be a converted corner with ability to tackle and break down in space more than you need to be that thumper. Joey Browner, David Fulcher, Ronnie Lott. There was a whole era of these guys in the 80s and 90s, and they were like linebackers. Steve Atwater. Those guys don't exist for the most part anymore, and the positions evolved to much more of a coverage position.
Yeah, you got to cover. You got to cover everywhere. And it's funny because some of these players that are bad cover safeties get moved to linebacker, and it's like, well, you still can't cover. So I don't care if you're small and fast, you still can't cover. So I'd rather have a big linebacker than cover instead of a small safety who's fast, but coverage was never their thing. You got to be able to cover in the back 7 no matter what. And yeah, they've really officiated the hitting out of the game. And that's why wide receivers are getting smaller and smaller. You don't have to run through the trees anymore and worry about losing your head, right? So you could be a little slot guy and be a little quick guy. And who did the Rams draft last year? He weighed 155 pounds. They took him in the 2nd round.
Tutu Atwell.
Tutu Atwell, 155 pounds. That used to get you undrafted completely. You were not on a draft board at 155 pounds. The Rams drafted him in the 2nd round, and he got hurt.
Hey, I know teams that if you're not 175, you're not on the board.
Yeah.
And there's also teams out there that won't draft a corner who's under 5'10", like 5'9" and change, not interested.
Nope.
I mean, seriously.
To
me, that's a little extreme.
Like McDuffie in this class had only 29-inch arms or something. It's like, there's going to be teams out there who's like, nope, don't want him. And if we draft him, he is only slot, period. That's it.
Mondo Ramirez says Hernandez would be a great pickup. He's a mauler. Well, that's great. But then the next guy in the chat says Avatar Singh says Arizona got Will Hernandez. So he could be a mauler, but he'll be a mauler for Arizona. And this is one that's kind of interesting. Itchy 95, Cole Strange. I guess that was a name that Kyle Shanahan threw out earlier that maybe they had some interest there. So maybe Cole Strange could be one of their picks.
Oh, I love Cole Strange. If he's on the board, we're gonna have to talk about him in my mock draft because he's got that guard center versatility. He played mostly guard, but I think he played some center at the Senior Bowl, and obviously he has that ability to do that and would be the perfect style of player. And by the way, he went toe to toe with 49ers first rounder. I mean, this is a guy that went to Tennessee Chattanooga. He was going toe to toe with a guy the 49ers drafted in the middle of the first round, a defensive tackle, Javon Kinlaw, who was much bigger and nastier than he was at that time. And he hung with him. So Cole Strange is for real.
Did I say Arizona got Tutu Atwell? The Rams got Tutu Atwell. Arizona got Rondale Moore.
Right. No, yeah, we said Rams. I think we had it right.
Yeah, okay, so it was Rams. Yeah, Rams got Tutu Atwell, who flies from Louisville. Rondale Moore, though, also flew. When I'm watching the Niner Cardinal game earlier this year, man, it's just like the Niners, every time Rondale Moore got the ball, it was like, this guy is just electric. And I remember asking Kyle about him.
He's not skinny. He's short, but he's not skinny. Like he's pretty roughed up, dude.
He's a pretty yoked up guy. Mm-hmm. All right. So now you've gotten my mock draft. We've hit the chat. We rolled through the chat. And if we'll get back to the chat. So if you have more comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. Now it is time. It is time. It is that time on the Krug Show podcast where Brian Peacock does his mock draft. And I'm going to even write it in the margin here as we go. And unfortunately, I'm not going to let you trade. So you're just going to have to pick straight through. Are you okay with no trades?
Oh, they're going up. I think they're going up from 61, but I'll stay at 61. Someone's good.
You do think they're going to trade up from 61?
I don't think that
the 49ers
envision that they're going to have 9 rookies make the roster. So I think they have an opportunity to move around, maybe not far. They're not trying to get up to round 1 or anything, but go from 61 to say, the 50s, the late 40s, just to make sure they get the guy that they like and not play the waiting game because, they're at a place where they might start to run out of options and maybe only one guy falls to them. Maybe none of the guys they have there. So I think there is sort of a really deep class there in the second round, but I think it starts to thin out late second. And then you have a new group that's really valuable through the third round. So the 49ers are in an okay spot. They just need one of those guys to fall to 61.
All right. We are at 61 and the 49ers are on the clock and Brian Peacock is making the selection. I'll give you the top of the board and then you can tell me what position you want to look at and I'll tell you who's available. But top of the board right now, both running backs, Kenneth Walker III and Breece Hall, they're both there. Jaquan Brisker, the safety out of Penn State, he's there. Trey McBride, who's a phenomenal receiving tight end out of Colorado State, he's still on the board. A lot of interesting names here. Wan'Dale Robinson is on the board as well. Brian Robinson, if you're like the running back out of Bama, he's on the board. A lot of interesting names are here. Marcus Jones, a cornerback from Houston, very popular among 49er fans. Go ahead. Is there a player that you just know right now you want, or do you want me to tell you who's on the board at certain positions?
Of the players you mentioned, Jaquan Brisker has me the most interested. And, that's a position where you could draft a guy round 2, plug him in. You have a starting strong safety. You're in a really good spot. So that one interests me. I want to see who's there. I like Marcus Jones as well, 5'8". He's a smaller. He's competitive. He can play a little outside, but the Niners could have a need for a slot corner as well. But I would be interested to hear who's there on the offensive line and who's there at wide receiver, just in case there's a guy that's just dynamic to pass on.
The interior offensive line has Sawyer, the big tackle or big guard from Georgia, Dylan Parham from Memphis, who I really like. He's there. Sean Ryan from UCLA, who has really good career down there. Ed Ingram from LSU, Cole Strange, who we mentioned before from Chattanooga, Alec Lindstrom from Boston College, Thayer Mumford from Ohio State. That's the interior offensive line. The offensive tackles, Daniel Falala, who plays at Minnesota, Nicholas Petit-Frere, who I really like, who Ohio State Buckeyes left tackle, Darian Kennard from Kentucky, Rasheed Walker from Penn State, Abraham Lucas, Max Mitchell from Louisiana Lafayette's pretty good offensive lineman. And then wide receiver, you're saying who are the top wide receivers on the board? Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky, who had 19 reps of 225.
Yeah,
and he's a slot receiver. He looks really good. Calvin Austin, the burner from Memphis, Jalen Tolbert, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakur from Boise's a really good player. Justin Ross from Clemson was a phenomenal player just a couple of years ago. I mean, they were thought that he was going to go top 10. Here we are, and he's still there on the board. Romeo Dubes, Kyle Phillips, Velus Jones, Danny Gray. That's some of the wide receivers. So is there a certain position that you want, or is there a certain you want to go with Brisker? How do you
I like a lot of names there, and I would be fine with them, but there's enough wide receivers that I think something's going to be there at 93, and I feel similarly to the interior offensive lineman. And now there might be a run, and all those guys are gone, but I feel like you could press your luck and hope someone like a Cole Strange or a Parham falls to 93 for you. You could hope that one of those wide receivers, because of the size, Calvin Austin is really dynamic. If the 49ers didn't go sign Ray McLeod, I might go Calvin Austin because he is legit. He can line up everywhere, but solidifying that speed element they talked about. He could handle returns, so he would be someone I'm interested in. I might not be able to pass on him if he's still there. Alec Pierce. I like the UAB wide receiver Jalen Tolbert as well. But since there's so many receivers still on the board, let's press our luck there, see who's still there later, and let's go get a starter in Jaquan Brisker at strong safety.
Going Jaquan Brisker. There we go. He's made the pick. It's in. We're now calling Jaquan Brisker. Do you want to be a 49er? No, I don't. I always wondered about that. Is there anybody who on the other end ever says, you know what? Damn, I wanted to be a Bronco. Could you guys
call 49ers?
Lose my number. Click. All right. So you're going there. Now we're at pick 93. And what direction do you want to go? I mean, you still have, I'm looking at the board. There's some of those guys that we named are gone, but you're sitting there at 93 and they're still give you an idea. The Breece Hall is still there. Trey McBride, the Colorado State tight end, is still there. Damone Clark, who's a starting linebacker, though he's hurt this year and he's probably going to have to redshirt his rookie year. He's still on the board. James Cook, who's Dalvin Cook's brother from Georgia. There's a lot of talk. The 49ers, I think that he's one of the running backs that they've already met with. He's on the board. Damian Pierce, who's one of my favorite players, is on the board. Sam Williams, the edge rusher, is there. Greg Dulcich, the tight end from UCLA, is a really good player. He's on the board. Jerome Ford, who's a burning running back from Cincinnati, a terrific player. He's on the board. D'Angelo Malone, Nick Cross. What are you thinking? Now you went safety in the second round. What are you going to do in round 3?
The running backs are falling in this class. Yes. I did not expect that.
Breece Hall right here would be a steal.
He would be.
I mean, they list him as their 38th best player, and you're at 93.
And look, this is late third round. This is where you would have to start to really think about that. And I'm not a running back early guy, but Breece Hall is legit, and he is a 3-down back, and he's a star in the waiting. So he's so far and away the best player available. I might have to buck that trend of not drafting a running back high. I was going to look at a running back on day 3, but he's so far and away the best player available. Cook is interesting, but he doesn't have the early down back size that Hall has. And I heard an interesting, this is my podcast co-host on the Peacock and Williamson show, Matt Williamson, former ESPN strategist.
That's a good guy.
Great guy. And he said that he thought that Cook was super interesting for the 49ers because he was sort of the bizarro reverse Deebo Samuel, where he's mostly a running back, but can line up outside. Deebo's mostly a receiver, can line up in the backfield. You put both those guys in the field at the same time, all of a sudden you interchange them and you could still do the same things you were planning on doing. So Cook is an interesting one, really dynamic and athletic, but Breece Hall is so far and away a more complete running back. I'm just surprised myself. I did not think Breece Hall would be a selection for the 49ers in my mock draft, but at 93, you can't say no to that value.
You're going Breece Hall. That's good. That's incredible value. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, 39 to 93 or 38 to 93, that's incredible value. So now you're on the board again. The next pick for the 49ers is only 12 picks later. So you're at 105 on the board. This is in the third round. Still late round 3. And the best available player on the board they list is Isaiah Spiller, but he had terrible workouts. Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely at tight end from Coastal Carolina, Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, Damian Pierce, Jelani Woods, big tight end from Virginia is there. Alante Taylor, a cornerback from Tennessee. D'Angelo Malone, Nick Cross, Dominic Robinson, who they talked about. He's an edge rusher from Miami. He's a former wide receiver who's just got bigger, stronger, and more explosive, and now he's off the edge. Is there a position you're looking for? You've gone safety and running back.
I need to see the offensive lineman, see who's still there. It doesn't sound like Cole Strange made it, but there's a couple of other prospects I'm really interested for the 49ers. I don't know if 105 or waiting until the 4th round for the Nebraska center, Cam Jurgens.
He's there. Really, he's there. They list Alec Lindstrom as the top interior guy.
Okay.
Then Luke Fortner from Kentucky, Marquise Hayes from Oklahoma, and then Cameron Jurgens from Nebraska.
Might be worth pressing your luck to round 4 for Cam Jurgens. I know the 49ers were at, and John Lynch himself was at Nebraska's pro day. I think he'd be a fantastic fit. I think he might actually go a little higher. He might have to be the pick here in the real deal, but he might last a little bit. What's their wide receiver? Alec Pierce or Calvin Austin?
At wide receiver, you have Kyle Phillips from UCLA. Little, kind of he reminds me a little bit of Hunter Renfrow. Velus Jones, who I'm a huge fan of from Tennessee, who's kind of a Debo type. He can return guy, running back, wide receiver. Danny Gray, the burner from SMU. Bo Melton from Rutgers, who they've looked at. I know they've taken a look at him. Kevin Austin Jr. from Notre Dame. Reggie Roberson, Braylon Sanders. And then you're getting into, Tay Martin, Khalil Pimpleton, Tanner Connor, getting into more day 3 guys and more projections.
I think I would wait on those receivers. I like Velus Jones, but I think he's more of a day 3 guy. Just such
I do too.
He's not only was
he's 25. He's one of the older players in the draft.
6-year senior, and not only was it it wasn't even a late breakout. It was kind of never broke out. Right. He never had 1,000 yards in a season for all his athleticism. That worries me a little bit with him.
He was never really the man anywhere, but he definitely is. At SC, he had reasons because there was all kinds of other guys. At Tennessee, he was fantastic as a special teamer, but didn't get as much run from scrimmage. I love him though. I think that he ran in the 4.3s, and he's physical and he's tough. He's already got both his undergraduate degree and a master's degree. He's a smart kid.
At least he put his 6 years to use there.
Yeah, exactly.
I went to college longer than that and only picked up a bachelor's degree. So props to
Sac State was the best decade of my life. Are you kidding me?
Edge. Anybody there on the edge?
The edge. Yeah. Let's see the edge rushers. And this is a good edge rush draft. And you're staring at some good ones right here. D'Angelo Malone, Western Kentucky. He's about 240, but he's an awesome speed merchant off the edge. Dominic Robinson, very raw. He's going to need to be coached up a little bit, but he might have the best physical tools. Then you have Michael Clemens from A&M. He's sitting there. They looked at Alex Wright from UAB, who's 6'6", about 270. Jeffrey Gunter, who I really like from Coastal Carolina. It looked so natural. To me, if a guy, looks like he's 240, and then you look down at the card and he's 270, that means he had an incredible workout. And that's where Gunter was for me at the combine. I watched him. And I'm like, oh man, I bet you he measured in about 250. I saw he was closer to 270, and he looked incredible. So, and then Trey Williams from Arkansas is a great pass rusher. He's had some off-field issues as well. What do you think? Is there you going edge?
I think my favorite prospect on the board is the Nebraska center Cam Jurgens. And I think this will be the right range for him. I think he's a future starting center and a perfect fit athletically for Kyle Shanahan's offense. You get him in-house. You let him train behind a guy who's played so many snaps for a Kyle Shanahan offense, and you want to develop that next center and keep that price low on the offensive line. Might not play a lot this year, but Cam Jurgens, the center from Nebraska, I think it'll go in the hundreds. Will it be close to the top of the hundreds or 134 in the 4th round? I'm going to go here.
Hand in that card, Cam Jurgens. Come on down. You're a 49er, according to Brian Peacock.
Yes.
All right. Now we are at pick 134. Top players on the board is Trey McBride from Colorado State, the tight end.
Might have to start collecting those prospects that fall a little bit.
Yeah, he's pretty intriguing. Like, there's 3 tight ends. The top 3 tight ends, our top 3 guys value-wise left in this draft are all tight ends. So who do you like between Trey McBride, who's a receiver, incredible receiver from Colorado State, Isaiah Likely, who's got long arms. He's another really underrated receiver from Coastal Carolina. And then Jeremy Ruckert for the Buckeyes, who, a little bit of a run blocker, a little bit of a receiver. That's three nice tight ends all in a row right there.
Those are all really nice. And I thought tight end might be a position to target a little bit later. I don't know where Jelani Woods is going to go, but I think he can hit the seam like nobody's business. But I don't know if he's the complete tight end that Kyle Shanahan be looking for. Trey McBride is so athletic and such a good pass catcher that I would love to see him in the 49ers offense. And
the only thing about tight end, Brian, is that they brought back Dwelly. They have Charlie Warner. They have Kittle. And they have another tight end. Who's the other tight end they have? Don't they have a fourth tight end?
Nobody that was dressing on game day that I can think of. There was a guy in the practice squad that I'm blanking on right now. And it seemed like Warner finally took over from, that sort of number 2 role, and he's a better blocker than Dwelly. And Dwelly's only back on a 1-year contract. So I think you could draft a guy that could come over the top of Dwelly and potentially just be the number 2 guy, depending on if you want the blocker or the receiver. And George Kittle spent a lot of time hurt in his career. So get a dynamic pass catching weapon there that you can plug in and move around, and, positionless football. Okay. You got a tight end that can do a few things for you. I think value wise, Trey McBride, again, sort of like the Breece Hall pick, not a player I expected to be on the board, but you almost have to just allow that value to fall to you and accept it when it does.
Is there any other, before you make the pick, is there any other positions you want to take a look
at?
I'd
be interested in that big kid from UAB, right? The defensive end, 6'6", 270 pounds. And I know the 49ers have been looking at him. I don't know if he would be someone who could still be there for you in the 5th round, but I'd be interested there because
he's listed at 162. You're picking at 134. So he might still be there.
I do like that value in the 5th. Let's see if we can get that value in Trey McBride now. Add another dynamic pass catching weapon there. Since we didn't go wide receiver in this draft yet, maybe we'll still add some speed there later. But let's go with Trey McBride here. See if Wright's still on the board or one of those edge guys a little bit later in the 5th.
I'm loving your draft, by the way. Brisker started with the safety from Penn State, then Breece Hall from Iowa State, then Cam Jurgens to fill a need, the Nebraska center, and you got Trey McBride at pick 134. So now we're at pick 172. And let's see the best player on the board. It's a running back, Rachaad White, Arizona State. Tyler Batty from the running back from Missouri's there, Hassan Haskins. Now we're getting into the running back value. Pierre Strong is listed at pick 143. Alex Wright, you mentioned him before the D end.
Yep.
He's on the board.
Okay.
If you want to go corner, there's still a speedy corner in Kalen Barnes from Baylor. Sincere McCormick's a pretty good running back from Texas San Antonio. He's there. Gunter is there, the edge rusher that I like. Mike Rose, who was I believe the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in that conference, the Iowa State linebacker, he's still there at 191. Zacoby McClain, a linebacker from Auburn, who I really like, is there as well. A lot of interesting names still on the board. What position are you looking at? Is there something you want me to run down for you here?
Yeah, still a lot of value at running back. This is where I thought the 49ers would be a nice place to get a guy like Pierre Strong and add some speed to their backfield. But we already went running back a little bit earlier. And so I think it comes down to those 2 edge guys. Let's get a high upside edge player. Tell me a little bit more about Gunter. He's not a player I've watched a lot of. I do like Wright, though. Do you think Gunter's a more valuable prospect than Wright at this point?
I think Gunter's a better athlete than Wright. Wright's big. Wright's 6'5", 270, and on his way to 280. You know what I mean? He's a big bodied guy. I think Gunter's a little bit more of an athlete, a little more of a speed, a little bit more of edge speed, where Wright is a great athlete as well, but I think he's a little bulkier, a little bigger, maybe a little bit better against the run. I like, of those two, I like Gunter more, but man, I like them both. They're both guys who can play right away. I think whether you go Gunter or Alex Wright, you got a guy who could at least play in a rotation. And that's what the Niners have up front. They got a deep rotation. The other thing I like about Gunter is in the wide 9, he's got that real explosiveness, and that it's hard to teach. I saw him in the All-Star game and I thought, wow, look at this guy. He's flying up the field. He's got a motor that doesn't quit. He just loves to play. So I lean towards Gunter, but either one of those guys I think are good football players for sure.
I'm going to lean toward right because I've watched more of him, and he just feels like more of a 49ers pick. But I'm going to go back and scout some more of Jeffrey Gunter because you sound fired up about him. And so I don't
Yeah.
want to steal your guy who you had in your mock draft. So I'll change it up. I'll go with Wright in this
Okay,
mock.
Alex Wright from UAB is the pick. And now you're at pick 187. And so far, I'm just looking at your selections. You got Jaquan Brisker, Brees Hall, Cameron Jurgens, Trey McBride, Alex Wright. You still have 4 picks left, 187, 220, 221, and then Mr. Irrelevant at 262. So we're now at pick 187. And if you go to the best player available, still a lot of running backs at the best player available. Also, the tight end from Maryland who ran in the 4.5s, Okonkwo. He's there on the board.
Chig Okonkwo.
Yeah, he's a big guy who moves. I mean, he's not Vernon Davis 4.37, but same school, similar, athlete. This guy runs in the low 4.5s. At 250 pounds. But you already got McBride, and they're already pretty stacked at that position with Kittle. So I guess the question I would have is, where do you in this group? You got Brisker for your secondary, but does the secondary need more help? Like, who's your nickel back? Do you feel good about the corner depth?
I'd be looking for some different shapes and sizes in the secondary. Someone who could line up in the slot, someone who could line up outside, maybe give you just some more versatility. I know the 49ers have tried hard to strengthen their special teams, and this is where you start to look to draft players like that late in the draft. I would want to look at wide receiver first, though. See if anybody slipped through the cracks, some speed, some playmakers out there, because the 49ers do need numbers at wide receiver.
All right, at wide receiver, the top-rated players are Kevin Austin Jr. from Notre Dame, Charleston Rambo from Miami, Reggie Roberson Jr., who plays at SMU, Braylon Sanders from Ole Miss, Dontario Drummond from the same school, Jalen Naylor, who's, his nickname is Speedy Naylor from Michigan State. And then further down the list, there are guys like Tay Martin from Oak State. I really like Tanner Connor from Idaho State because of the workout that he had. And then you go further down the line, Jaquari Roberson from Wake is interesting. Derek Young from Lenore Ryan's a really interesting receiver. Britton Covey from Utah. Jaquez Ezard from Sam Houston State. I mean, there's Demetrius Robinson, started at Cal, went to Georgia, finished at Auburn. He's on this board still. Jalen Virgil from App State runs exceptionally well. He's on the board. So there's a number of receivers. The highest rated receiver left is Kevin Austin from Notre Dame.
I know Kevin Austin had some really great workouts at the combine. Roberson was sort of the forgotten guy. I think some injuries at SMU with him as well. But I'm going to go with Austin. He's the best receiver on the board. I think the 49ers need to add that sort of athleticism on the outside and just a little bit more competition there at wide receiver. They need some bodies and they need some guys who can make the roster and maybe give them a little bit more down the road at wide receiver. So I like Kevin Austin, liked his workouts. I think he's a player that has some helium and a player that could, has he's not like one of those diminutive players either. Like, he can get up, he can sky, he's got a little bit of size.
Yeah, that and then the Niners really seem like they have an affinity for Notre Dame players. Doesn't that seem like they, they've taken a number of Notre Dame players. I thought they took the wrong Notre Dame player in Banks because you could have had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and if you watched Notre Dame, 2 years ago, I mean, Koramoah was everywhere.
I was blown away.
I know didn't he have a heart condition of some kind, which may cause him to fall? But I mean, that was a first round pick who fell to the second, and they went away from him to go with Aaron Banks. I think that pick looked bad the first year. I think it's going to look worse over time.
Yeah, that I didn't like that at all with who was on the board. And Koramoah was the most obvious, like first rounder all day, modern day linebacker. You can play him a safety if you want. He could rush off the edge. I mean, he could do everything for a defense. And we saw Cleveland trade away one of their linebackers, the guy from Alabama they drafted a couple years ago, just to make room for him, make sure he's on the field all the time in Cleveland this year. And then the edge rusher out of Georgia, who the New York Giants drafted a few picks after the 49ers,
Azeez Ojulari.
I mean, those two players, the value was right there. The need, especially for Ojulari, I thought that would have been a home run pick for the 49ers. And they went with the guard that I didn't think with the scheme fit in Banks. So we'll see what Banks ends up looking like with the 49ers. But
so you're now down to your final 3 picks. We're at pick 220. Do you go best available here? Do you have a certain guy on day 3 you're looking for at a position? You tell me, and I'll shop around the positions if you're looking for somebody.
I'm trying to think of my late round gems right now, and nothing's coming to mind. And I think I've hit most of the positions of need. Thinking about the secondary that we talked about earlier, nickel corner or outside corner, maybe. Is there anybody there at cornerback that's got some?
Vincent Gray from Michigan, Monteric Brown from Arkansas, Fayon Hicks is one of my favorites from Wisconsin. Jacoby Durant plays for South Carolina State. Sean Jolly from Appalachian State. Um, it the depth. Jack Jones, who plays at ASU, decent player in the Pac-12. He's on this list. Now you're getting into beauty in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
When it comes to these corners. I mean, then it's about Trace Swilling is down the list, but some people like him. Stephen Gilmore from Marshall. There's a lot of interesting. Obi Ebo for UCLA. It's a pretty good player. Nick Grant, who played at UVA. Is there anybody that you're thinking of?
Nobody jumping
safety.
out.
A lot of times safety. There's a lot of day 3 safeties that seem like they're, safety always seems like a position. Percy
got a
Butler's
strong
there.
safety early. You find somebody who can maybe
strong
jump in
safety
and do some
earlier.
slot versatility, or maybe a free safety type still. Special teams is super important. So, who's on the list there at safety?
It's really difficult to say who's on the board as far as who's left at safety, because it's not a lot of big names for sure.
Not a lot of value there. And we can move on to who's the best overall players?
The best overall player at this point, it's updating here. You're starting to see some defensive backs, go, or some defensive backs. Let me see. I'm updating here. Let's see who is the best on the board. I would say, okay, let's see. What would you say the it's now updating, so I've got to give it a second here.
Yeah.
All right. So Joey Blunt from Virginia, Elijah Hicks from Cal, Brandon Radley Hill from Washington, Corey McCoy from Marshall, Will Adams from Virginia. It's kind of somewhat of a no-name group of safeties.
Yeah. Definitely nothing's jumping out there. I'd be interested in
Marquise Bell is on the board. He's not bad. Florida A&M.
Yeah, big guy, a little stiff in space. I think at this point, especially, I've already gone with a strong safety. He wouldn't be a fit, but he might be someone I'd be looking at. Just a little bit of a thumper with some size late in the draft. I don't really like his lateral movement skills though.
Yeah, I mean, is there a position that you're looking for in particular?
Who's best player available? Any position I'd be down for at this point if there's a player that stands out.
Let's see. The best player available is Jack Kerner, a safety from Iowa. Brad Hawkins. Oh, wait. Let me go to the best players available. Who do you have here? Malcolm Rodriguez, a linebacker from Oak State. Dustin Crum, the quarterback from Kent State. Braylon Sanders, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. Tyler Goodson, a running back from Iowa. Smoke Monday, a safety from Auburn. Dontario Drummond, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. We're late on day 2 here at this point.
Yeah, it's getting into the you're waiting for a position coach or the special teams coach to pound the table for somebody that you send in the card for. But yeah, I'm not hearing any names that I'm really excited for. Are you seeing any names out there that make the Krueger list of? And I know you love unearthing hidden gems as it pertains to NFL draft prospects. So the small school guys, I'll defer to Larry if you see somebody out there, but I'm not hearing any names that are jumping out to me right now.
Let's see. Let me see the best available player, Keontae Ingram, from USC. Sincere McCormick, Reggie Roberson. Let's see. Jack Cohn, the quarterback from Notre Dame. I don't know if you're a big Jack Cohn fan. Who else is on this list? Cole Kelly is an interesting quarterback who plays at Southeastern Louisiana. Where do you put quarterback on this list? Is quarterback you have Jimmy. I mean, you have Jimmy. You were trying to move him. You have Lance. You have Sudfeld. If they move Jimmy, do they want a third quarterback?
It's hard. I feel like quarterback would be, a very late, Mr. Irrelevant type pick. There's the quarterback from Brown, maybe, a smart guy come in, or maybe someone who's got some athletic traits and comes in and really would be someone that you would have to
EJ
just,
Perry, or a fan of EJ
yeah,
Perry from Brown?
yeah, you probably have to cut him and to keep him on the practice squad. So maybe an undrafted free agent type as far as quarterbacks go, just because Jimmy's still on the roster. And even if he's not there for the season, they guaranteed Sudfeld some salary. And it really was a move where they thought they were going to be trading Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think they were locking Sudfeld into that backup role with that guaranteed salary. It's not a huge salary, but they were sending a message that he was going to be the number 2 guy. And it sounds like they really like Sudfeld. And I would have thought they would have been after a more of a veteran backup quarterback for Trey Lance. But, with that contract, I really feel like they want their 1 and 2 to be Trey Lance and Sudfeld. And then maybe you had an opportunity for, a practice squad sort of a quarterback, or maybe it's Jimmy G that sticks around. So
Daryl Parrish says quarterback Akil Glass is a steal as an undrafted free agent. And somebody else liked him the other day in one of the mock drafts we did. I haven't seen a lot of Glass, but he's an athletic quarterback. The 2 guys I kind of like as day 3 quarterbacks. I like the kid from K-State, Skylar Thompson, who's 6'2", 225. Super athletic. I mean, maybe so athletic he could play a different position. That's how athletic he is. And I'll tell you, the other guy that I really like, I think is kind of underrated, is I like Nick Starkel, who started off at Texas A&M, finished up at San Jose State, played well for San Jose State, and 6'4", 215. The ball comes out on time. I mean, he really makes a lot of pro passes, and he makes them with pretty good consistency. So I like Nick Starkel, and he might be a 7th round guy. He might be an after the draft guy. But that's a quarterback that I kind of like. But is there any position that I always like to look at the skill positions to see if there's anybody that has slipped. And running back wise, you have Sincere McCormick, you have Max Borgi, who played at Michigan or at Washington State. He's really interesting. And then you've got Jamaine Martin, who played at NC A&T, is a really good back. Master Teague for the Buckeyes, Jalen Warren. You've got some good running backs still on the board. Receiver-wise, there's always going to be some decent receivers out there. Reggie Roberson is still there. This is 3 drafts in a row where, there's been a lot of fast receivers that, a lot of good receivers. Johnny Johnson III for Oregon Ducks is still there. Stanley Berryhill III, who played at Arizona, is there. There's some decent receivers, and
I like where Cool Whip's head's at here. Daryl Cool Whip Parrish in the chat. First of all, great call with Akil Glass. Not a player I've watched a lot of, but I love the name there. And he talks about a nose tackle. Is there a nose tackle on the board? A space eating type of a player that could come in like DJ Jones, who was a 6th round pick at one point in time.
Yeah, it's funny. The top rated tackles are Eric Johnson from Missouri State, Deshaun Dixon from Norfolk State, LeBrian Ray, who played at Alabama, and he got kind of lost in a group of guys at Alabama. He's kind of intriguing. Kalia Davis played for University of Central Florida. He's really interesting. He's a good player. Kevin Atkins from Fresno State's on this list. CJ Brewer from Coastal Carolina. Demetrius Taylor, who played at App State. The guy that I love, now this is a deep sleeper, but his name's CJ Wright, and he played at Georgia Southern. And he's 6'6", about 295. The guy can reverse jam a basketball and do backflips. He was a high school running back, and he played on the nose, big number 94 for Georgia Southern. And he's, as you can imagine, if a guy can do backflips and dunk the basketball, he's pretty explosive. But he's a little undersized. He's more of a movement guy. But, as a late round flyer, there aren't that many greater athletes at the defensive tackle position than CJ Wright.
I love that. I love what I hear about CJ Wright and that athleticism. LeBron Ray out of Alabama, he's a big time recruit. There's some athleticism there, and it's no slight on a guy. Maybe he doesn't earn an every down starting role at Alabama with the guys they got rolling through in the defensive line year after year. You might have been a superstar starting every snap at another school, in another big school, right? So I'm interested in LeBron Ray, could become that 3-tech type of guy, but your guy CJ Wright sounds very interesting too. Why don't you break the tie for me there?
All right. Well, and then to me, this is if you're going D tackle, I like Kobe Whiteside as well, who was a
Oh,
great high school player, 5-star recruit out of the city of Houston, and he went to Missouri, and he's like 6'1", about 310, and he's Missouri's had some really good players as well, and Kobe Whiteside I think is a good day 3 pick. To me, it would be between Kobe Whiteside and C.J. Wright.
there's your run stuffer, your one technique though, right? The 6'1", 310 body type. That's what you'd be looking for.
That's Kobe Whiteside. That's
Yeah,
more Kobe Whiteside.
let's go
Yeah,
Kobe Whiteside.
let's
Let's
go
get a
Kobe
little bit of
Whiteside.
nose
All right,
tackle
Kobe
competition.
Whiteside. So now that's pick 220. You're picking again right now. These picks go back to back for the
Oh, right.
49ers.
Yeah. These are the comp picks at the end of round 6, back-to-back picks.
Exactly. And the
Well,
top player on the board at this point is the running back Sincere McCormick. A lot of running backs. In fact, Devontae Price from Florida International, Abram Smith from Baylor. The top 3 players on the board are all running backs, though you went running back early.
well, how about this? Let's dangle Trey Sermon in trade, since the coaching staff apparently doesn't like him, and let's load up on these valuable running backs that are on cheap rookie deals for a while and go Sincere here.
Sincere McCormick. Yeah, that's really good value. McCormick is, he's one of these guys that, he runs, he definitely has good balance. He can take hits and bounce off and just keep rolling. So now you're at the final pick of the draft. This is pick 262. The top player on the board is Dejon Dixon, a wide receiver from Nichols. I'm looking at the board. Slade Bolden from Alabama's there. Keontae Ingram, another running back from SC. Trey Williams, who's got some problems off the field, but he's an edge rusher for Arkansas. He's there. Max Borgi.
Did your guy CJ Wright make it through?
I bet you he did. Let's see.
Yes,
he's there.
We went the stubby tackle. Let's go with the athletic freak and just see if one of those guys pans out.
There you go. CJ Wright, defensive tackle, Georgia Southern.
You sold me on him. You sold me.
Yeah.
I like the idea tackles that can throw down.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's your picks. You went Brees Hall, running back from Iowa State, with pick 61. You came back with the tight end from Coastal Carolina, Isaiah. Oh, wait, no, actually, I should say you went Jaquan Brisker. I'm sorry, I went to the wrong list here. Jaquan Brisker, the safety from Penn State. Then you went Brees Hall, 93 out of Iowa State. Then you went Cam Jurgens, the center from Nebraska, at 105. You went Trey McBride, the tight end from Colorado State, at 134. Alex Wright, the defensive end from UAB, at 172. Kevin Austin, the wide receiver from Notre Dame, at 187. Kobe Whiteside, the D tackle from Missouri, at 220. Sincere McCormick at pick 221, the running back from University of Texas at San Antonio. And then you finished up with CJ Wright, the defensive tackle from Georgia Southern, who can dunk a basketball at 6'1", 290 pounds. So that is a hell of a draft. I liked my draft, but man, looking at yours, man, I don't know. Brian, I think you might have ousted me here with really good draft. I love the fact that you went with the need in Brisker early, but then you went best available and you got Brees Hall, Cam Jurgens, Trey McBride, Alex Wright in back-to-back picks, 93 through 172. I think that's the strength of your draft, and then you got some good players as well on day 3. So overall,
you got to let the draft come to you, Larry. That's
seriously.
Don't force it, because something surprising will happen. You didn't think that guys like Koromoa or Azeez Ojulari were going to fall last year, but if you got blinders on and you're looking for a guard only, you're going to miss on the values that fall to you on draft day.
Look at that. And then hell of this, hell of that. I'm getting the endorsement here. He says, I like Nick Starkel. I don't know. Did you watch San Jose State much this year? You probably didn't see Starkel at A&M very much, but he's 6'4". He's about 215 pounds, and he's really accurate. Very, very accurate quarterback, and he's a smart kid, and he's a good kid. So I like the idea of Nick Starkel as an undrafted guy.
The only San Jose State player I watched was Derek Deese's kid, Derek Deese Jr., the tight end. So he could be
Who
someone
I would definitely sign as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah.
You know, he's a little undersized. He's about 235. He probably needs a year in an NFL weight room to, lift. But yeah, Derek Deese's kid, and the Deeser was a brawler, so his kid's tough.
Oh yeah.
And the kid's a really good movement tight end who made a number of big catches for Starkel this year at San Jose State. I would love Starkel and Derek Deese. Those, if the draft ends and you're calling up all the undrafted free agents who, didn't get drafted, first call I'm making is to Starkel. The second call I'm making is to Deese's kid.
There you go.
And I'm luring them in with the idea that they can you can have your quarterback throwing you passes in camp. Hell of this, hell of that. Since I like CJ Wright and LeBron Ray, you're on fire, Larry. All right. Yep. Hell of this, hell of that. Look at that.
Love it.
Feeling good about hell of this, hell of that.
Yeah, me too. Positive vibes.
Why don't we finish with a little discussion on Jimmy? It's the gift that keeps giving, it's or the trade that refuses to go down. I don't know how you want to. By the way, if you're tuning in for the Final Four, 60-59 Kansas with about 6 minutes to play over Carolina. But give me your thought on Garoppolo. We saw this thing. He played decently for the 49ers down the stretch, hurt. Then, like we would expect, he kind of, midnight struck and bad Jimmy came back and he just couldn't do anything at the end of the game against the Rams. How much of that was his fault? How much of it was the fault of the line in front of him? We can debate that till the cows come home, but they didn't get it done. Not only did they not get it done, they didn't make a first down on either of their last two drives against the Rams. And I don't know about you, but for me, the NFC Championship game really left me with a bad taste in my mouth about Jimmy and just turning the page there. So I was totally endorsing turning the page, getting down the road. They want to work together on making a trade. Jimmy said he wanted a fresh start. So he made it perfectly clear that he, as much as he liked being here, he didn't want to stay here. And now, they were going to work together on a trade. And then all of a sudden, Russell Wilson got traded. And all of a sudden, some people, now Matt Ryan got traded. And now Carson Wentz got traded. And then Deshaun Watson came back. And now he's got a new home. And then, we started to see so much quarterback movement that it just seemed like almost all the spots on the board have been taken up and Jimmy's still with the 49ers. And now I'm looking at their options, Brian, and their options are confusing. It's hard to really know. Do they have an option? Do they not have an option? I think, and all of this matters too. People are like, it doesn't matter. I think it matters. Like, I don't think, you just like, I could make an argument for not releasing him right now because he could wind up in Seattle. I could make an argument that if you trade him when the 49ers want that money, but they don't want it right now because it doesn't sound like there's a free agent they want to spend that money on. It sounds like that money's earmarked for Bosa and for Debo extensions. So if that's their deadline, then they want to move by day one of training camp, you would think. But then what's going to be the reaction to the locker room if you trade him or release him? Let's say you couldn't trade him. Let's say you release him to one day before training camp starts. Aren't there other players in the room going to view that as a very aggressive and somewhat hostile move towards the guy who they have strong feelings for in Jimmy G? I don't know. To me, that could go any direction. There's a lot of different layers to this thing. How do you think it's going to play out?
And the locker room thing, and I know the 49ers have, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have a better feel than we do from the outside of the locker room stuff. Is it so much of Jimmy's locker room that Trey Lance can't break through if Jimmy's still around, even if he's just a name on a piece of paper in the spring and not on the field, because Trey Lance will still be getting all of those reps. Yeah, and by the way, did you see on NFL Network today with Emmanuel Sanders, who didn't play with Jimmy for very long? He was gushing about Jimmy Garoppolo's leadership and couldn't understand the disrespect for Jimmy Garoppolo and how important that leadership was in their run to the Super Bowl. And so, everybody that comes out of that building always says the same thing about Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's a lot of love for him there. Can Trey Lance over the course of OTAs and mini camps in the spring really win people over and prove to them, that when Jimmy Garoppolo shows back up with his, once he's cleared with his shoulder, that oh no, I've lost it. They trust this other guy now. Does he even have that ability? Is that even a possibility for him to do that, or is Jimmy just always going to be this figure over Lance's shoulder? There's the argument that I can buy that iron sharpens iron, and you want Trey Lance to be able to go into training camp and win a fight against Jimmy Garoppolo and beat him out, and he's got the talent to do that. And so there's a lot of levels to this thing. To me, the only deadline left is breaking training camp, and you want to get Jimmy Garoppolo's contract off your books so you can roll that over into next year. And so not only do you get, Garoppolo's deal not on the books next year because he'll be a free agent, but you can roll over whatever extra cap space you have as long as he doesn't start taking paychecks. So basically, before he starts taking paychecks in week 1, similar to what we saw last year with the New England Patriots, and they cut Cam Newton. And Cam Newton had a really good preseason, by the way, and they cut him to let the young guy play. And I wonder if the 49ers could do that if they can't find any, if nobody has any injuries at quarterback, everyone drafts the guys they want. So there's nobody on draft day that wants to swing a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. And if Trey Lance beats him out, then maybe you cut him right before the season starts at the end of training camp. And it'll be clear to everybody if Trey Lance won that job. But I think to protect yourself from injury of Trey Lance, knock on wood, or just to see if there's something that happens out there in the league. And especially once Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, there's not going to be any excuses for teams that need a quarterback in July. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of 32 starters, and I think the 49ers view him as too valuable to just toss aside right now, and it doesn't really help them to cut him right now unless there's money they need to spend right now today. So I think Jimmy Garoppolo, if a team doesn't come calling, is going to be there in July. Then the question is, do you cut him before camp, or do you let those guys compete and protect yourself against injury? Because what happens if you cut Jimmy Garoppolo on July 1st and then on August 31st, Trey Lance, gets hurt, and now you have neither quarterback. So there's some arguments to both sides of it. As long as they're pros and they can handle it and they can handle that competition, I think it would be kind of fun actually to see them go toe to toe and watch Trey Lance go earn it and go beat Jimmy Garoppolo out. Is that even a possibility though, with how much of a stranglehold on the locker room that Jimmy Garoppolo has, would be my question.
It's so interesting because what if now you're painting the picture? I thought you were going a different direction. You're painting the picture of what if Trey gets hurt? My question would be, what if they go to camp and Jimmy gets hurt?
That's a good point. That's more likely, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. What if Jimmy gets hurt and all of a sudden now he's like, you know what? I need surgery on my thumb. Now you're stuck paying your backup quarterback $27 million in a year where maybe Trey Lance is ready to take the job. And you've burned through your cap room. You haven't extended Bosa. You haven't extended Debo. And that money that was earmarked for those guys is now being taken up with a quarterback that you can no longer cut because he's now hurt and having a surgery. So that to me makes me very nervous about bringing Jimmy to camp. And not to mention the obvious thing that we're not even talking about, which is every day in camp is going to be this guy completed 6 of 11 but he was with the ones, and this guy, but Trey completed, 9 of 11. Yeah, but he ran, 30% of his snaps with the 2s and 5% of his snaps with the 3s. Do you see how this could get to be just this, not to mention the people who cover camp and try to make it like it's science. And all of a sudden there's pie charts and graphs and people are tweeting out their camp stats. If I got to see one more person with their camp stats, your camp stats mean jack. All right. This just in, your camp stats mean jack. It means
I
nothing.
Can't wait for those practice box scores, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Camp stats make no sense. I've sat in meetings where they've said, hey, look, the first 5 passes, I want you to throw to receiver X because he's never awake early at the beginning of practice, and I want to make sure he's awake tomorrow. So I want you to throw. So what happens if you throw 5 balls to this guy and he drops all 5? Now your camp stats, which are now going on Twitter, and somebody else is entering him into some database don't mean anything because it's about trying to wake up a receiver who's got sleepy practice habits. There's just so many factors that go into camp production that you just do not let your eyes tell you what you see.
Yep.
That matters. But the percentage, I mean, preseason game percentages don't mean a lot to me. Camp percentages mean beyond nothing. I mean, I obviously this is a pet peeve of mine. Itchy 95 says Larry making too much sense. Thank you. But I mean, that's the thing. Do you bring Jimmy? I agree with you. Part of me says don't trade away a quarterback because you may need a quarterback. And what if Trey gets hurt? But then what if Jimmy gets hurt? Now you can't extend. So to me, I guess I would say this. If you get to camp and you're thinking you're going to go with Jimmy, you got to renegotiate. You cannot have Jimmy there at 25 million. You got to get him back. You got to cut that in half. At the minimum. I mean, he's got to make 10. He can't make 25. You have to be able to extend Bosa. You have to be able to extend Debo. You got to spend that money on your roster. That's how I see it. The other question is, what's left? I mean, who are really out there? Somebody said Carolina's the only option, that Matt Rule's fired if he doesn't trade for Jimmy. I mean, to me, what do you see in the Carolina situation? They've got Darnold. He's making 18 mil. He's not any good. Rule's probably fired at the end of the year if they don't show some growth. What chance does he have at growth with Darnold sitting there? I'd be interested in engaging them, Brian, just because what if you could cut a deal with them and said, I'll take Sam Darnold off your hands and we'll give you a quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo you can replace him with. And guess what? I'll even sweeten it with, my second round pick and a day 2 pick in next year's draft. But I want the 6th pick in the draft. And then I'll take Sam Darnold and I'll take his $18 million contract and I'll rip it up. I'll give him a new 3-year deal at $6 million per. And I don't mind guaranteeing him $6 million per over the next 3 years. Because that's more in line with backup quarterback money. And I think I'm Kyle Shanahan. And I think in my system with my talent, my play calling, that I can build Sam Darnold into something and maybe trade him for something in a year or two. But I'm not doing this for nothing. You're over a barrel right now. You're fired if you don't get a new quarterback. So I want that 6th pick overall. And then maybe you get the 6th pick overall, and then you start trading down the board and kind of building back your draft pick arsenal that you gave away for Trey by moving from 6 down to maybe round 2, and in the process picking up a slew of future picks. I mean, that to me, that there's some. I'd be open to that. I'd be open to the idea of Darnold, a renegotiation, leveraging, taking Darnold's money for a good asset, maybe a pick, maybe a Christian McCaffrey. What do you think? Is Carolina in play for Jimmy?
Yeah, and I don't think the 6th pick in the draft is the right place to pick a quarterback, even though someone's going to go there and they're going to overdraft some of these players. And really, you just look back at Carolina and you're like, what are you doing? You had Justin Fields sitting there on the board at 8 last year, and you could have, escaped all this nonsense with Sam Darnold and maybe saved your jobs. And I don't think a rookie quarterback is going to last with Matt Rule because Sam Darnold, the only thing he's proven in the league is that he can't play. And I don't think a rookie quarterback is going to come in and win you enough games to save your job either. So it's really a tough situation that the Panthers are in right now. And I think they would scoff even at the 49ers trying to basically buy that 1st round pick and take it on Sam Darnold's 18 million. But I could envision a plan that would make sense for both sides and allow John Lynch to save some face and get some picks back for Jimmy Garoppolo. And it would allow Carolina to keep the 6th pick this year. And that would be asking the Panthers to pay half of Darnold's salary. So now you have a backup quarterback at $9 million because he's got $18 million guaranteed. So you've got a backup quarterback in Sam Darnold. If you're the 49ers at $9 million, could you work a restructure with that $9 million, get that down even further, add a 2nd year so that way he's around next year? He could rehab his image much like Trubisky did just by not playing for the most part and get some decent coaching in the NFL for maybe the first time ever. And who knows what Sam Darnold could be at that point. And maybe Matt Rule could save his job with a functional starting quarterback in the NFL with Jimmy Garoppolo. And who knows, maybe Jimmy could do the same thing with the Panthers and restructure his contract to take away some of that $9 million hit that they're paying for Sam Darnold. And then it would be more, and the Panthers don't have any day 2 picks this year. So this would be for a future pick. It would be similar to the Wentz deal. You would get maybe a 5th rounder this year, and then a 3 that could become a 2 if Jimmy Garoppolo plays a certain amount of games, or if you make the playoffs or whatever it is, just to guarantee yourself a little bit and give yourself some wiggle room if you're the Panthers and feel good about getting yourself a starting quarterback. And the Panthers need a dang offensive tackle at number 6 anyway. So I think that's the best path potentially for both teams. Will they see it that way? I don't know, but the Panthers got to do something other than rolling back with Sam Darnold, and a rookie quarterback is just going to be someone that is going to be developed for the next head coach if they go that route at number 6 and overdraft one of those guys. I will say this, though, something I learned recently that really made my ears perk up. So Kenny Pickett out of Pitt might go in the first round area. He was recruited by Matt Rule when Rule was the coach at Temple. And in fact, there is a tweet of Kenny Pickett declaring that he was going to accept the offer to go play for Matt Rule at Temple and be their quarterback. Then he changed his mind and ended up going to Pitt instead. So he had already accepted the offer to go play for Matt Rule. Matt Rule recruited Kenny Pickett, and David Tepper is an alum of Pitt. There's a building, I think, that's got his name on it, like the Tepper School of Business at Pitt. So there's a lot of connections with Kenny Pickett and the Carolina Panthers decision makers. So I wonder if Kenny Pickett might be, and I wouldn't say that the evaluation should lead them there at number 6, but I wouldn't be shocked if Kenny Pickett is sort of their guy in the draft, and that's why they haven't done anything at quarterback.
That's interesting. Would they pick him at 6?
They would have to, unless they trade down. They don't have any 2nd or 3rd round picks.
Wow. What do you think of Itchy 95? He says some people want Brian Burns back in a trade. I mean, Brian Burns is the ideal edge rusher to put opposite Nick Bosa. There's just no question about that.
You couldn't fax
from the Niner perspective.
Yeah. You couldn't fax that paperwork in fast enough if Brian Burns was on the table. Yeah, you would accept that in a heartbeat.
Will says Jimmy will be throwing by the 4th of July. That's when the clock starts on trading him before training camp. Is that the plan? Maybe, get him healthy and let him demonstrate before camp what he's got, because then at least, you're getting something for him. I'll say this. I mean, if I'm John Lynch, this whole thing makes me incredibly nervous, because it just seems like there's all kinds of things that could potentially go wrong with this. I guess the other question is, how convinced are you, based on what you saw in the preseason and in his 2 starts, that Trey Lance is ready to roll as the starting quarterback? What do you think? I mean, the Arizona game was one of the worst game plans I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I just couldn't believe how, the risk reward, how they just kept risking him getting hurt with these quarterback runs with no lead blockers. They were designed runs. I mean, that was horrendous. And then they learned from that. Obviously, Kyle learned from that. By the time he started again against Houston, the offense looked nothing like that offense we saw in Arizona. And Trey looked quite a bit better in that game than he did in the Arizona game. So where are you with Trey Lance and his development?
Sorry, I was muted there. Trey Lance is a unicorn. There's never been a prospect that had his resume that was drafted, period, let alone a 1st round pick, let alone a top 3 pick, a guy that played 1 year of college ball at the FCS level. And that 1 year wasn't even the season before he was drafted. That's never happened. The only, and I crowdsourced this one and asked all my listeners, who was even a quarterback that was drafted, period, that didn't start the season before his draft at quarterback. And the only name that we could come up with was Matt Castle, who was a 7th round pick, who was backing up a Heisman winner on the best team in college football. Right. So Trey Lance's profile is a complete unicorn for what he is, and the guy needs to play. So I don't care how ready he is, he needs every single rep that exists that the 49ers can give him, and he's got to play at some point. And I know that Kyle Shanahan is not kind to young players, and I don't know if he's Kyle Shanahan ready, but you got to do your best to get him as ready as possible. And I was really worried about that game plan, because that was Kyle Shanahan telling us he did not know what the heck to do with Trey Lance in that first start against Arizona, running him into the ground, quarterback power after quarterback power, 16 carries. You can't do that. And I felt a lot
And
better.
their counter, Brian, was like, "Hey, it wasn't 16 carries. There was 9 carries. It was 7 7 scrambles.
Yeah.
So what? So what? You still ran your quarterback, the future of your franchise, in through the A gaps with no lead blocker. And guess what? On his design quarterback runs, he took a hit every
Oh, yeah.
single time, and he averaged like 3.2 yards a carry. In the scrambles, he averaged like 11 yards a carry and took a hit on like a third of the carries. So there's a huge difference between, quarterback scrambling and trying to create more time for himself and maybe taking off, as opposed to a design quarterback run. And they ran Trey on power runs through the A gaps with no lead blocker. So I mean, I don't want to hear about it was only 7 or it was only 9 or whatever. Who cares?
Yeah,
You
and
ran your quarterback up the A gap. I mean, congrats. I mean, that was a horrendous game plan. And, obviously they learned their lesson, because by the time the Houston game rolled around, they didn't do any of that same stuff. They didn't do any of that.
I felt much better about Trey Lance after the Texans game. And one thing I will say, even in the first start, is it never, for a guy who had that resume that I just laid out there, he seems like he's got his head screwed on straight. It didn't seem like the moment was too big for him or anything.
No,
He's
not at all.
So that's a huge test for any rookie to pass. And Sam Darnold's in year 6, and he still hasn't passed that, right? He's still seeing ghosts out there on the field. So I think they did get the human being right as far as drafting Trey Lance. I think he does have his head screwed on straight. I think he's got all the talent in the world, and I loved seeing that start in week 17. I know it was against the Texans, not the best team in the league, but that made me feel a lot better about where Trey Lance was in his development. And I understand sitting him for a year, but I just don't think you can sit him again. And he's got to be able at this point to beat out Jimmy Garoppolo, even if they did have that competition. But I will say Trey Lance did learn one thing, and you mentioned all those hits and how quickly he was taken down by the big players in the NFL. I think not even the speed of the game, but I think the size of the game is probably something Trey Lance was like, oh, yeah, I can't just hit the truck stick on these guys in the NFL. I think he was 0 for the entire season. Every time he tried to run somebody over, whether it was a DB or a linebacker or a defensive lineman, you saw him go over the top of guys all the time at North Dakota State. I don't think he won one of those battles when he tried to truck somebody in his rookie season in the NFL.
Last one for you. And, dude, we really appreciate you going along with us here. Biggest, best move of the offseason, worst move of the offseason. What do you got?
I think they held their water and didn't overpay a guard and a nose tackle. And it was tough to see DJ Jones and Laken Tomlinson go, especially Laken Tomlinson, who literally played 100% of the snaps for the 49ers and is a really good player and solid, but you can't give him $14 million a year. And DJ Jones is a part-time player as a nose tackle that you should be able to find a cheap replacement for. So I think it was prudent moves by the 49ers, even though I don't think the 49ers made themselves necessarily better. And really the only place the Niners made themselves better so far is at cornerback. And I like the idea of them going in, trying to get a top cornerback. And the more I've watched Charvarius Ward now, the more I like it, actually. And the contract isn't bad for him at all for a starting cornerback. And it really, makes their depth chart file in behind the 2 starters in Mosley and Ward now. And you don't have to put too much pressure on the second-year corners in Diamador Lenore and Ambry Thomas. So they can be the 3rd and the 4th corner. And maybe Diamador Lenore is that guy who's going to take over in the slot for K'Wan Williams. And I think he's better suited to play than the outside anyway. So I like that. And the 49ers are definitely better at cornerback, but overall, they're not a better team than they were last year unless Trey Lance can unlock them and put them into this new stratosphere because of what he can do at quarterback. And it goes all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, making defenses defend more blades of grass, which is something that as a runner and, with his arm strength, something that Trey Lance can do.
I'll read one more here. Avatar Singh says, guys, please subscribe to this Bay Area Legends channel and get him to 10,000 subs by the draft. First of all, not a legend by any stretch.
Legendary,
but,
Oh, yeah.
Not a legend, but closing in on 3,000. And we do appreciate all the people who have been with us. And, by the way, follow this guy, Brian Peacock, at BD Peacock on Twitter. And we need to tell people, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and be extra sure to hit that reminder bell so you can catch all of our upcoming shows. We love you guys and everybody who's participating, and I'm having a lot of fun. And thanks for supporting my channel, The Krug Show. Thanks to Len and Ryan. Thanks to our sponsors, Telemetrics and Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist. And thanks to all the people at Bay Area Sports Live. And Brian, good stuff, man. Thanks for stopping by. We love doing this, and we'd love to do it again. Maybe even before draft day, maybe draft week, we'll get you back on and do another mock and see if you've changed some of your thoughts, or if I've changed some of my ideas on who we want the Niners to emerge from the draft with. But I love following your stuff on Twitter, and keep putting out good stuff, and we appreciate you for stopping by the Krug Show today.
Oh man, thank you for the invite, Krug, and it's always a pleasure to come on and chat ball with you. And I love the passion you bring, and love the new channel. So I'm excited for you and the channel. And yeah, we definitely got to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to everybody who participated. Thanks to, as I said, Len and Ryan, my new team of guys. And until next time, hope you